Chukma, my name is Wolf Roby. I am events and outreach with Coyote and Crow. Um, Events and outreach. I juggle the things and wear all the hats. So today we're going to be talking about storytelling in the Coyote and Crow world. And the folks that we have on our panel here today were some of many folks who were involved in the art and the writing and just the world building and the overall experience of what Coyote and Crow is and will be becoming. Um, that's called foreshadowing. Stay tuned. So if everyone wants to introduce themselves, we'll start with Tali.
Hi, my name is Tali, and I am a pharmacist by day. I work for the Indian Health Service here in Oklahoma, and a writer by night. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm coming to you guys from the Cheyenne and Arapaho lands here in Oklahoma, and I'm really excited to be participating. I am really lucky to be playing in the sandbox that all of these other amazing indigenous creators have created that is the world of Coyote and Crow. I get to play in that and make stories up in that world, which has been really fun. And I'm honored and really excited to have had the opportunity to write the first, hopefully, of many, not just by me, but other, native creatives. The first full length novel set in the Coyote and Crow universe. And that'll be coming to you guys later this year. It's called Hemlock and Sage. So, really excited about that. Thanks for having me.
You're muted, Wolf.
M.
Hi, Bojo. I'm M. Matson. I am Susan Maria Jibwe. I'm in Minneapolis and I work with natives in my other job, my other life, and I work with food sovereignty, indigenous food sovereignty. And I edited the core rule book as well as am writing future stories to share out with future volumes as that comes out. And yeah, I'm really excited. My positionality with the project was really interesting because I got to see it near kind of the end of its first phase. So I got to see a lot of the really cool work people had done. Yeah, happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Derek.
Yeah, I'm Derek. I'm a member of the Samish Indian Nation, and I'm coming to you from unceded Duwamish territory, about 200 miles or about 150 miles south of my people's traditional territory. I came on to the project early-ish, and I was the creator of the Tiswak Nation and did other writing and developing throughout the book and the rules system. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to y'all.
Excellent. Coyote.
Nanani, it's Coyote. What a suck up. My name is Coyote Old Bear, and I'm a citizen of the Comanche Nation. And I am a writer, and I wrote on. I got it. I was pretty early on, and I wrote the people of the freelands, the uh, all the various nations. Um, the And I kind of did a lot of the didn't make the map, but I sort of designed how the city's laid out, how Cahokia is laid out, that kind of stuff. Did some. I invented some of the obstacles, like the mammoths, the uh, movie Mozai, and some of the other things, and a little few of the technological things. There's some Comanche stuffed in here and there in the in our language. So yeah, that's what I did.
Great. So I know when we were kind of putting this panel together, we talked about kind of the culture building and some of those elements that you brought in that, we had talked a little bit about what that looks like, and, building those things for a game system that is very different from so many other TTRPGs and other types of games that we see. So can you tell us a little bit about what that culture building entails when you have something like Coyote and Crow that needs its whole structure built?
Well, it's kind of interesting to me because there are a couple of different aspects to that. That's something I thought about a lot while I was doing it, before I did it, and I still continue to because there's a problem in a lot of places when people go, well, I don't want to use a real tribe because I don't want to misrepresent them, which is a fair thing. But then if you make things up out of whole cloth, they don't make sense. And then if you look at European history, who the Europeans were in 1491, those nations weren't nations. Those cultures moved around and combined with other cultures and split apart and had different influences. And that's why we have etymology, European languages have etymology just like indigenous languages have etymology, because every one of those nations is made up of different people. So, as a Comanche who grew up in Oklahoma, although I now live in another part of Comanche territory, um, of my band's traditional territory, I used a lot of Comanche. There's a lot of Comanche influence, but I also thought about, I have cousins who are Kiowas, who are Cheyenne Arapahoes, who are, and I had a very traditional upbringing. I was with old Indian people, I grew up with old Indian people. So I remain, 90-year-old. And so I used everything I knew and combined it and split it apart and imagined if some of these people joined with some of these.
Uh-oh, did we lose her?
Looks like.
Okay, so kind of in the same vein, and if we get her back, then we'll kind of weave that in as we do. One of the questions that we all talked about in forming this panel was how your own culture has influenced not just your creative work with Coyote and Crow, but also other creative work, and just kind of, how storytelling is, not just part of the game and that creation, but also other avenues, and how those things kind of come together. Derek, would you mind kind of kicking that off, and everyone else can kind of think about that for a sec?
Yeah, sure. Well, unlike Coyote, I wasn't raised in a very traditional way. My father was in the military, which is common among Native American people, but it meant we moved around a lot. And so much of my time growing up was not near my traditional territories. And so a lot of my understanding of the cultures involved was similar to everyone else's. I learned in public school. My parents definitely taught me to put a more critical eye to the things that were being said about Native American people specifically. But I had to do a lot of research coming into this to not only understand my own people better, but understand, the general Coast Salish and Salish people, to do justice to what I was writing. And, coming to it, from that indigenous perspective and from this perspective of a gamer, we didn't want to make it utopian. We didn't want to make it, single note or one-sided, but we also wanted to avoid very specific tribal references so that everybody could feel like they were represented there. So I did, one of my passions is stories and storytelling. So I did a lot of research on the traditional stories throughout this region. Did a lot of reading on, understanding the values and things like that. And also thought about, what might set my people apart from the other nations. Oh, welcome back. And so, I really focused on the generosity that is part of my culture, and on the advantages that come from abundance, which is something that my culture had that a lot of other cultures didn't. We have a saying, the tide will set the table. We had such abundant fishing and clamming and things like that, our people developed many more leisure activities than other similar nations. And so I'm trying to incorporate those ideas.
Excellent. Em, I know this is something that we had kind of talked about beforehand too. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just kind of thinking of something Coyote said, which is in Europe, a lot of these nations didn't exist prior, in 1491. A lot of our nations looked different. So as I was reading this and thinking of the stories I wanted to tell, it's work to not impose your nation's more recent histories. Because, I'm an Anishinaabe, a large part of our story is a migration story because of colonialization, because of a prophecy. And so it's, what would we look like without that? What would we look like with our stories that are true to us still, without imposing more modern takes? And I think that's what was really fun as the editor, which was I got to really, truly understand that, our stories are told so that we can interpret our lives at no matter what time. And these old stories that our ancestors went through, they're still relevant to us today. And so it was very much, how would I interpret this world with the stories I've been given? Which I think is just a really fun way to be able to approach a tabletop RPG. Those are a lot of my thoughts when I'm thinking about bringing my culture in.
Absolutely. And that's, I think that's relatable for a lot of us, with myself being Chickasaw, and, in those tribes that experienced removal, and, so many of our nations that have had similar experiences, not just in the United States, but also in Canada and other areas. So yeah, that's definitely something, especially when we're looking at new stories. Speaking of new stories, Telly, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of how your cultural perspectives have influenced kind of your input?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was hoping I get the chance to chime in on this, because one of the things Derek said really got me thinking too, is that the all of the creative work and energy and influence of individual cultures to create this world of moccasing has been so impressive, because everything is laid out in this really unique way where you can bring your own tribal influence, your legends, your history, your stories into a space that is in a lot of ways altogether new, but with all of those touches of the familiar, the pieces of culture that we experience throughout our lives that our elders and our ancestors experience. I think that's just really cool. And again, for me, getting to just write a story in this world that others created, for me, it was particularly fun to set a story in Cahokia, which is this hub of culture and creation and science and just everything in the world of moccasing. It's this huge, city that is full of everything and an amalgamation of all these different cultures. And so I got to write a story about Cahokians, and then also bring in, I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I got to bring in, Chalagi, and getting to, bring some of the influences of the stories that I grew up hearing, learning from my dad, both cultural stories and the stories of what he experienced in northeastern Oklahoma. on the land that we got from allotments and things like that, like the culture of what we experienced, and him growing up and me hearing his stories and things like that, bringing those into this really granular look at one or two primary individuals living in Cahokia, being part of that large culture, but also getting to put specific cultural touches on it was really fun. And the people who created Coyote and Crow gave me that opportunity. And that's one of the things that I'm so excited for, everyone who's getting to play the game and who will now get to play it, virtually, through Roll20 and all that stuff. Like I can't wait to see what people create, because it is so individual, but it's also so rich in a community sense.
Absolutely. I don't know how many of you folks out there in the viewing public are on our Discord. There have been not only some amazing stories, but also some amazing recipes. And when we're talking about Native culture, food is where it's at. And so it's been really interesting to see how people are really taking the stories that they're given, the stories that they're creating, and bringing those together. It's good to see you back, Weiri. Hope you had a nice little break there. We were just talking about how our individual cultures have influenced our writing and storytelling. I know you've got, a little bit of experience doing some of these things. If you would like to chime in there, that's kind of where we are. Sprinkle in some stuff from when you stepped away for a bit.
Well, like I said, I grew up with old Comanches and people of other tribes too, but mostly old, old Comanches. And so that really informed me, because no one is weirder. No stories are weirder than the stories of the really old stories of those old indigenous people, and also the sense of humor. I would have to say that. And something that really informs my writing is um, the gift economy, which is something that I don't think that Europeans were really exposed to before the internet. Although, I mean, it's pretty exactly duplicated in certain arenas on the internet, like in fandoms. I think that fandoms are, in general, a really good way for non-indigenous people to learn about gift economies, because the more clout your clout actually comes from what you give away and what you can provide for the community. So that's a really good, to me, reflection. But that's something I try to work in, because it's something I take for granted. It's part of my culture that I carry with me, and I tend to work that into anything that I write, just because it's an idea that I think more people need to think about and be aware of. But also, I just do it, and also the kind of some of the traditional gender ideas that I was brought up with. That it's more mutable and not really that's not really reflective of the traditional European gender ideas. That, and I would say, those were big. Um, and barbecue. I don't know, food, barbecue. Those are things that really, well, I mean, food is a big part of indigenous cultures, but also it's a way that indigenous cultures have really influenced um, the world, because most of the foods people eat all over the world, um, you know, came from us. You know, there would be no tomato sauce in Italy without us. There would be no marinara sauce. There would be no
Man, every time she gets on a roll,
We'll never know what there won't be.
we'll never know. We'll never know about all the here. I'm Italian right here for you, for the food. So, you know, and so much of that culture is, things that as different indigenous groups move around. Oh, now we have two of you. Whoa, okay. All right. I was going, but go ahead. Potatoes, no, tomatoes.
Oh, tomatoes. I was going. The Belgians would have no chocolate, and the poor Irish would be sitting there without potatoes. Um, there would be no corn. No one would have corn. They would have no corn. There's so many things. Most beans. Um, you know, well, I'm sure, um, you could tell them. So, but yeah, I mean, we met, we made a difference.
Yeah, I think globally, 60% of the calories consumed are from indigenous American foods.
Wow. See?
And the rest of it is water. So, that's also us. So, yeah. So, some of the other things that we had kind of talked about in building up to this panel, we've talked about, other projects and other things that we're plugging in. I know several of us work in, other fields, health, and, other creative outlets and things like that. So how do you feel like your day job influences the way that you tell these stories? Are you bringing in that science and technology aspect, or are you what did Derek say? Accidental game writing, bringing us around to adventures. So kind of what's your style, and where do you start, and where does that inspiration come from? Since I picked on you, Derek, you can go first.
Yeah, yeah, I do call myself an accidental game writer in that, I've been part of the gaming industry or part of the gaming community, that is, for about 30 years, but never really had any aspirations to doing it professionally. As it turned out, me and Connor just kind of floated in the same geek and Native American circles. And when he was he was posting about wanting to find someone from the Pacific Northwest to write and not being able to find anybody. And I hated the idea of someone not from around here writing about this culture. So I put my hat in there and he gave me a chance. But yeah, like my day job is I'm a student and I am a stay-at-home dad. And so certainly that has given me a lot of opportunity to spend more time on my writing than a lot of people that have a more traditional day job probably had. And that's been a lucky break for me. And, my background with just years and years in the hobby is it gave me a lot of lessons about what I didn't want to do. So much traditional gaming, especially with the, most popular role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, is largely about colonization. It's about civilized people going into uncivilized lands, and that's how colonizers viewed themselves. And so going in and knowing that I wanted to write stories where there wasn't some wild frontier that people had to find, but rather it was about rediscovery, about more about culture and reclamation and things like that. So that is sort of the direction that I took the adventure writing from, especially, is trying to avoid all those tropes of colonization and Westerns and things like that, and trying to give a different kind of storytelling that people could start from.
And that's definitely a tall order, considering, pretty much everything we read and consume, especially in terms of gaming, kind of falls back on that a lot. I know there have been several lists that, Coyote and Crow's been shouted out on, and we love them. That are bringing out more and more of these types of games and types of stories. So that's super cool. But we're here to kind of talk about us. So, we had kind of talked about something similar with your stuff about just working on kind of a different aspect and seeing things at different stages. So how did that how has that come across for you, kind of being and anyone else that wants to chime in, being in the community, and seeing the excitement build and people talking about these things, because I know for me, like, I'm seeing the comments and the things, and like, I didn't write anything for this, so I'm excited, so I know that you all who had a much bigger role in that, really have, you have to have some thoughts in there.
Yeah. Kind of going off of what I do in my other job, as well as kind of getting the book in a more together state, it has kind of put two things out for me, which is like stories of place and stories of food, which is what I feel Indigenous cultures and stories and everything, those are some of our biggest touch points. And it has been really cool to get to go through the book and see those stories of place from people of those places. And one of my favorite additions to the book is the recipes in it. I think because that is very true to what a culture is and what our touch points are and what is important. And going forward in writing my adventure and that sort of thing, and the games I'll be playing with my friends, is really focusing on the stories of place and stories of food, because those are intrinsic to us, and they make good stories every time. Yeah, they seem to come up a lot in my life, so it's nice to focus on those.
Absolutely. And I think, Tally, we had talked about some similar things with some of your projects, and kind of tying those together.
Yeah, I was also very excited to be able to write an adventure for the upcoming crowdfunding project that we're going to be releasing soon. Maybe you can talk more about that, Will. But I said I'm a pharmacist. I work for IHS. I've worked with tribes in North Carolina. I've worked up on the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians in North Dakota for several years. I miss them very much. Now I'm back in Oklahoma. And one of the things, whenever I first read through all of the Coyote and Crow materials, that I fell in love with was the comedians and the role of laughter in healing. And that meant so much to me as someone who literally, my job is to help manage medications and get people off medications when they don't need to be on them, and on the right ones, and optimizing therapy. But laughter and joy and being able to have conversations with anybody, whether they're someone around my age or an elder or just whoever it is, being able to bring a little bit of joy to their life is part of the process. And so it was really exciting for me. I almost, as soon as I got the idea of an adventure, I went straight to the hospitals, to the role of comedians in those settings. So my adventure is going to be set around it's kind of a whodunit mystery adventure set in kind of like the healthcare setting of Cahokia. So I just really appreciate that, and I wish that in general mainstream culture valued more the I don't know, the optimism that and the positive vibes that laughter and joy and togetherness can bring to someone who's in a situation where their health isn't as good as it could be. So yeah, I definitely honed right in on comedians, and I knew that I wanted to do something with that because it meant so much to me in like my everyday practice.
Absolutely. And I think, a sense of humor and, maybe like somebody that freezes up every time she talks down here in the corner has said, bringing that aspect forward makes to me, the universe feel a little bit more realistic, and feels more like home. So we're all indigenous, and we know. Oh, see, I was gonna have her talk, and there she went. I just had to think it that time. She'll be back. We have talked about our indigenous experiences and all of these things, but I think all of us also live in kind of the world at large. Some of us have had some traditional experiences, but for the most part, it really seems like a lot of us have spent a lot more time in medical, in other, in traditional education and things like that. And something that comes up a lot in both our social media and, in our Discord chats and things like that are a lot of conversations around non-Indigenous folks playing the game, and storytelling and things like that. So, I think we would be remiss not to address that. So if Coyote can stay with us, you want to try? Okay.
I would love to try. I've actually written about this. Um, part of the problem is there's a reason anyone can do it. Anyone can play the game. The game is written for anyone to be able to play it, right? We wrote this specifically for anyone to be able to play it. The reason we ask if you're non-native, if you're that you not bring in elements that even if, and I'm going to say, even if you have a degree in Native American studies, don't do it. My experience is that mainstream media, academia, etc., mainstream culture as a whole has deep misunderstandings about indigenous cultures across the board. Um, and there's so much, and it's so prevalent, of this misinformation and misunderstanding. I mean, you look at Supreme Court decisions and you hear these questions asked by Supreme Court justices that show that they're completely ignorant and as in unaware of Indian law. And you look at, I have sat with academics, sat as academics asked questions of my great grandmother, about her life before the Oklahoma land run, because I'm old, and she was really old, um, and seen how leading and pointed their questions were, and what they wrote afterwards, and her rereading it and going, this is not right, this is not what I said, and then me going, yeah, I was there, that was not what you said. So that your base information, you can start with the very best of intentions, but if you try to bring something in that you don't have firsthand experience with, it's going to skew the game. And that's why we ask that non-natives don't bring anything in they think they know. But if they play the game as it's written, there's so much you'll know afterwards. I think you'll have a much better feeling for who Indigenous people are. Because, it's funny, but as an Indigenous person who wasn't that exposed to non-native culture until I went to school, being immersed in non-native games, books, media of all kinds, that's really where I learned about non-natives. Um, because despite my appearance, I grew up with very old, very brown people. I just have the great white father. So, but he wasn't around. But so that was where I learned about European culture, really. And you can really learn about indigenous people. Although these are fictitious nations, they're made out of real nations. And although these are fictitious events, they're based in an indigenous viewpoint, an indigenous way of looking at the world. So that's what I would say about non natives playing the game. Please play it, it'll be fun and you'll learn something, and there will be great recipes. So, all those things are true. And the illustrations are jamming. Oh, anyway.
So many. I am so proud of you. You made it through the whole thing you wanted to say. Yay. And maybe for the non-Indigenous folks, I should probably tell you that, this is how we tell each other that we love each other. We make fun of each other constantly. Ask my kids. It's a real thing. If I didn't pick on you, you'd think I didn't like you. So, as we kind of continue on that note, does anyone else have things to add? I see M doing a little. Go for it, M.
Yeah, everything Coyote said, especially since, as we mentioned, like we have to spend time with our own cultures to understand what would apply to the world of moccasing, so it's hard for the non-Indigenous people to, even if they have current information, accurate information, know Indigenous people, it just might not work in this world. And that's what's really fun about it. One thing on a personal note that I'm kind of excited to implement in my own games too is, this is a world that is finally opening up after years of isolation within communities. I'm excited to see what my friends who come from different cultures as well are interested in bringing in to this world. How would they interact with this world? How do they see their people having survived? And so, in my games, I'm looking to implement a gift and burden system in which if you are someone from South America, from Vietnam, from, Nigeria, what is new here, and what is this world going to be like for you? A gift of being, you are someone who has knowledge that not everyone has. What another part of the world is like. But also, if you're trying to do a stealth mission and you're a person that nobody has seen here before, it's going to be a little bit harder. So I'm looking to implement some interesting mechanics in hearing my friends adapt this story to their own cultures and understand my culture through it as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun culture sharing that this is a vehicle for, which I'm really excited about.
Absolutely. And speaking of playing with folks around you, if y'all haven't seen the 17 times that I've shared the rules light version on our social media and in our Discord, the full game is packed with all kinds of elements and different character creation and world and game mechanics that seasoned gamers are going to be like, yeah, that's super cool. But some of us that are trying to play with aunties or kids or groups of folks that Indigenous or not aren't familiar with TTRPGs. The rules light version, which is on our website, you can go download the handy little PDF. It just requires 2 or 3 D6s and really not much of any prep or effort. It's kind of a choose your own adventure kind of thing, sort of, from the adventure that somebody else already chose for you. You know what I mean? And so that's one of those things that there are things like that exist now, and more things, more adventures, more story arcs for those folks who maybe aren't quite ready yet to create their own complete story. Folks that aren't 30 years in the gaming community, like some folks over here, to just jump in and be a story guide on their own. So there are options. There are options for everyone, whether you're Indigenous or not, whether you've been playing games like this for 30 years or 3 minutes. There is going to be something that you can jump into. And if you still feel like you can't, go to Discord. Y'all, recipes, people are talking about food, make me drool a little bit in there. There's all kinds of stuff. So that said, as we kind of get to sort of a wrapping up point, what are some things that you all are looking forward to? Maybe not so much with your own projects, but in watching other people play. I know some of us have kind of shared some of that. We have some other things like the Nebula thing, just a little wee award thing, maybe sort of coming up that we might have been nominated for. It's fine. It's not a big deal. It's fine. So, things like that. Anybody else got, other personal projects, shout outs, hi mom, that sort of thing? Anyone going?
I know I'm super hyped to try out Tally's story now. Looking forward to getting the full version of that and trying out with my group. Because I've been in school, I haven't been able to do much gaming since we finished the book. And so this summer, I'm actually going to be running my first legend in Coyote and Crow. And I'm really looking forward to introducing my group to that. It's a very traditional gaming group, and just being able to introduce them to concepts from my culture that we haven't discussed much is something very exciting to me. And I also am working on some really exciting future projects, like presenting the world of Coyote and Crow in formats that we haven't seen out there before. So that's something exciting too.
I will say that there are going to be some amazing. I don't think there's every single one is going to be amazing. I'm not actually much of a gamer myself as far as TTRPGs, but I love to watch them being played. And so I am just going to be devouring as much as I can of it all on YouTube. I can't wait to see people streaming, as much of the content of people actually playing this game as I can find. I'm always on the lookout for it.
Yeah, very similarly. This is, a project about to bloom that I'm really excited to see everyone's take on it. It's really a jumping off point for a lot of people to tell stories that they may not have felt there were systems for in the past. And I think I already seen how people customize the system has been really cool too, because everyone likes to play different ways. So seeing people get into the crunchier parts of it, or kind of get rid of some of the crunchier parts, or, really customize to how they play and the people they want to play with is really, really exciting. So I just get really excited seeing what everyone posts and what everyone shares.
Let's see if I disappear. Bye. Hello. No. Well, basically that, although, all my kids, I say kids, adult offspring are gamers, and I kind of use them as spies, so that I can, to kind of probe for more questions about things than I would feel comfortable asking people on my own. And people, luckily, hopefully they don't go, yeah, that's my mom. So yeah, I do that. And so I'm looking forward to see what they report back to me. Also, I have a lot of other projects going on in other arenas. I do some TV development and some comics, coming out and that kind of thing. So that's what I have. That's what I have coming up, and I'm absolutely sitting on pins. I think all of us are waiting to hear what happens with the nebulas. I won't be sleeping right until But, you know, it is one of those cases, though. People always say it, and it's never true. But in this case, it is true that getting nominated is a huge deal. Not getting nominated, you know, I care deeply whether or not we win. Don't get me wrong. I care deeply. I care, you know, but I will still be happy if we lose. Just that we got nominated.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we've talked for almost an entire hour. Most of us have been here the whole time, except for, you know, our special guest down here in the corner. Leaves whenever she wants. So, you know, I'm so glad that we all got to, you know, kind of discuss amongst ourselves and, you know, kind of bring in some of the stuff that folks on our socials and other things have been talking about for a while now. Keep your eye on those socials and in that Discord because there will be announcements. So many announcements, you have no idea. That's all we got.
Bye, everyone.